Today's episode is sponsored by Coros. Coros is the leading customer engagement platform. From social media to online communities to digital customer care, Coros helps companies authentically connect with customers. Coros connects consumer insights across departments and helps companies run their businesses with their customers, anticipating their needs and accelerating sales. Coros works with over 2,000 brands, including 52 of the Interbrand 100 companies, and powers over 500 million digital interactions every day. Check them out at Coros.com. That's KHOROS.com. Hello and welcome to the Shiny New Object podcast. My name is Tom Ollerton. I'm the founder of Automated Creative. And this is a podcast about the future of marketing. Every week or so, I have the pleasure and the privilege of interviewing one of the industry's leaders. And I was introduced to Andrew Hogwood by Elle Setter at Santa Monica Talent. So thank you, Elle, for that. And Andrew is the Digital Director, Financial Services at Sainsbury's Group. So Andrew, for anyone who doesn't know who you are or what you do, could you give the listeners to this podcast a bit of background?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So I suppose a whistle-stop tour of my career was I started off actually in financial services, in marketing and commercial strategy, moved into the tech space for multiple years, and then I'm now in retail, but on the financial services bits. Some of the things on that journey have been I ran Vodafone's 2004 marketing campaign for the Olympics, which was an amazing opportunity. But all around it, I work through marketing, digital marketing, product, and commercial strategy.
So, as is customary in this podcast, what we're going to do is ask you a few getting to know you questions before we get into your shiny new object. So, before we started this call, we were discussing books, and it was interesting to know your approach to reading. But in terms of marketing books or books that are related to marketing, are these something you read a lot of, or do you buy books for people on your team, or are you just someone who uses books to prop up your laptop?
I read pretty widely. I try to read one or two books a week if I can. Obviously, if you have family commitments, that's very hard to do. But I find most of the reading is around a theme, something I'm interested in at that time. And some of them just spark interests or change your perspective on the world unexpectedly. And those are the ones I like the most.
So how do you read one or two books a week? How is that even possible?
You just get quite good at reading quickly, and whether it's on your commute or whether it's just an hour in the morning or an hour in the evening, it's just having that kind of habit of I will just use it to relax when I get back from work before I eat, and so that's normally when I read the most.
And so, are you able to read work-related books when you get back from work before you eat?
I normally try, and they're not exactly work related, but there's normally you find I do read a lot of non-fiction, and there are points in there that you just think, well, that's interesting, but do I believe it? Does it relate to my life or what I've experienced? And so I find that, and they're not. I wouldn't read a heavy one on say programming or something like that when I got home, but non-fiction I do enjoy reading.
And what kind of recommendations for books would you give to a marketing audience?
I think it's just more broadly keeping aware of what's going on. But specifically, I mean, and the book I've enjoyed most recently was called Factfulness, and it's by a guy called Hans Rosling. And there were several things that interested me about it. And he comes from Scandinavia, and he wrote this, I think, with his son and daughter-in-law. And just, even the approach of how he wrote it, and he wrote it over many, many years. But it was one of those things where, again, you wouldn't have thought that how that would affect a marketing perspective. But when you go into the book, it talks about, how do people actually live in the world? Who are these people? Where are they in the world? And when we think about something like poverty, we have an image that comes to mind about who these people are and where they live. And in something in that book, he talks about the four different stages of prosperity. and he puts it into pictures as well, which I'm one of those people that's quite visual. So, and when you see what level one, so at the lowest level, and it just brings it to life. How do these, what are these lives like? The person doesn't even own no pair of shoes, no toothbrush, probably eating the same kind of gruel type meal every day. And it brings it to life, but it also brings it to life through the data in the book that actually who we think are living in that way are not actually the same number of people in the same part of the world. You would have thought, oh, it's going to be these parts of Africa, or potentially you have all these biases. And it was amazing after reading that book. I looked at the world and our customers and opportunities around the world in a very different way.
So can you tell me a bit more about that? And that sounds like an interesting approach to describing how different people live. But then how did you apply that to your work and your business?
Yeah, and one of it is just when you look through the book, I mean, I think the first thing that I came away with is you basically realize that when Hans goes through his own story, it shows that Europe actually relatively recently has had a huge expansion or kind of progression in its quality of life. He was talking about his grandparents and how actually there was quite a lot of real poverty around. And actually, if you look at now in his grading system, pretty much everybody in Europe is living in level 4. I mean, we have lots of possessions, we have different shoes, different clothes to wear each day, lots of choice of food and available and affordable food. So it was kind of, I relate to that, obviously working in a retail business where we sell a lot of those things, but it was thinking about, well, what services really add value to our customers? What are their lives really like? And also open my eyes to the fact of, particularly in the kind of retail space, there are different countries in the world that, they're still going up that curve. And I mean, China is obviously a country where people's prosperity is increasing very quickly, but also places like Indonesia, Vietnam, massive countries, the Philippines, where they're not at Western levels, or they're not at level 4 for a lot of their population, but they're getting there quickly. And what does that mean for retailing and marketing kind of opportunities on a global scale?
So, outside of reading and getting inspiration from different perspectives in that way, what new belief or behavior has improved your work life in the last few years?
I mean, I think one of the key things in there is linked to reading. It's more just generally the curiosity of, I found that you can get so overwhelmed in work or with the pressures in life that you stop kind of looking for inspiration or reading or podcasts or kind of investigating. You get so many emails in your day, you don't really want to read anything or kind of embrace any form of learning. And then I found a couple of years ago, I started reading for fun again. I started also going and asking advice from lots of different areas, or just asking questions again. And I think that the behavior that has really improved, particularly at work for me, is very much ask advice first. And, what would they recommend? What are people's views on things? To inform your perspective of the work you're doing, the different areas around you, in life more generally as well. And that behavior just meant that rather than everything and you're going to tell people how it is, you go to, well, actually their advice and their recommendations, you may not take all of them, but just the flow of communication and the flow of information is so dramatically better. And also your relationships with those around you is suddenly you find that you're in the loop and people are proactively inviting you to, oh, well, maybe you'd be interested in this because you have a voice to bring, you're very inclusive. And you're not necessarily there to tell them what to do, but you've just got a different perspective. So I found that the upside of not only enjoying learning and finding out more things about what's going on around, but also the relationship side of being much more inclusive and being invited to many more things has been quite a fundamental change.
So there's a topic you mentioned at the start of that, which was curiosity, which is something that comes back and back and back on this podcast. And it's the main message that comes to all these senior marketers that I speak to, is the key thing, the key attribute is curiosity. But yeah, you mentioned the kind of the dark side of curiosity, or it is email or busyness or stress or lack of time. So how do you manage that? How do you make sure that you're indulging your curiosity and you're not ignoring it in favor of stuff that's important and urgent?
Yeah, I suppose what you're talking about is how do you make sure that you keep enough of a radar open to these new thoughts, these new bits of information, relationships, at the same time as remaining focused. And I suppose one of the analogies I like is it's a bit like being an eagle, where you want to be able to go up high so that you can keep abreast and you can see some of the landscape and be open and free to fly. And at the same point, you need to know when you need to dive back down to catch the mouse or whatever it is you're coming down to. How do you go into the right detail? And I think that's one of the things where you see it in emails as well. I mean, one of the things that I suppose I'm quite well known for is normally my emails have 3 bullet points in, and I'd use that just as a mechanism to force myself of what is it I really want to say, what is it we really want to discuss in this meeting, and there might be 20 things overall in general, but for that, how do you make it bite-sized so that this is the mouse we're going after? And if nothing else, if you've had that whole thing where in the email you also ask for their advice, if this is the direction I believe we're going in, these are the things I think we want to discuss. It's not definitive, as in it has to be those 3 things, but it's just to give some kind of structure, or else you get lost in it. And even if I'm asking someone's advice in an area I don't know that much about, I go, well, this is kind of what I think I'd like to explore. I mean, it might be naive, these things I'm asking about, but just trying to give some focus so that they, also they don't feel threatened. They know that, okay, I'm just there to try and learn, and this is what I'd really like to learn about. Most people react very, very well to that.
I really love that be an eagle analogy. I've never heard that one before. It's a nice way to look at it. And how do you know when you're not doing enough high flying eagle stuff?
I mean, as I say, like the kind of profile I have in a marketing perspective, I'm a bit unusual, as I'm much more hybrid than most. As in, I do have quite a background in data and analytics, but also I love the more qualitative side of making something that emotionally resonates with customers. So the marketing, the products, and the commercial strategy. And the flying bit in the sky might be more what people might see as the overall, what's the overall marketing campaign, the overall branding position, or what are we trying to do commercially to make sure that we're really going somewhere we want to go. It is hard because you get pulled into the detail all the time as is necessary to get anything out the door. But as you say, the stepping back is almost essential for, if you want to write 3-line email, or 3 bullet points, you have to be pretty clear where it is the overall direction you're going to be able to prioritize. So the two kind of link together.
So in the last few years, what have you become better at saying no to?
I think, again, it's linked to what we just talked about. I've become much better at saying no to meetings of more than 10 people. I've become much better at saying not no, but kind of not now to things. So anytime I see lists that are more than 10 long, I normally go to, well, what are the 3 things we need to do first? I'm not saying that we don't want to do those other 7, but it's just ordering of things. And it's becoming much more, I suppose, disciplined on what you're going to do and when and in what order. And I find that anytime you get presented in a presentation or something like a list of 10, you normally find that they're not, it's apple, pear, banana, and then something like a kind of a screw or a boot. They're not the same things. Of being able to separate out things into what are the actual right categories to talk about, and in what order. Because otherwise I find that your time gets, your mind gets lost, because someone's suddenly talking to you about a very small change and the right hand side, and then you're trying to think right up in the sky on the left hand side. Of actually the mind can't cope with that, and you don't really get anywhere. So I think it's kind of very much curating what meetings you go to, what conversations you have, and not saying no, but not no to everything, but no to some things that we definitely don't want to do. I think that's very helpful for an organization. But also not now, I think that's another useful thing to say is you got to respect that people work very hard in a lot of areas, but it's not the priority now and it comes later in the journey. And most people get that.
If you love all things innovation and want to understand how brands plan to emerge stronger from the current situation, don't forget to check out MadFest London on the 11th and 12th of November. My good friend Dan at MadFest knows how to put on a cracking event, and there's always plenty of amazing speakers, beer and cool people to meet. Check it out at www.madfestlondon.com. So we're halfway through the podcast now, and what we're going to do is flip to your shiny new object, which is open banking. So can you give the listeners a overview of what open banking is and how you see it as an opportunity for marketing?
Totally. Think open banking, I specifically chose that area because it's so unsexy that actually people might be surprised that it actually could be quite powerful. Now, I think most people are vaguely aware of what open banking means. Essentially, it means that, say you had an account at HSBC or NatWest or anything else, that data used to be locked inside that organization and only that organization could look at it. So the bank could look at your banking data, but no one else. And now there are two functionalities that come with open banking. One is called AIS, which is Account Information Service. And the other one is PIS, which is Payment Initiation Service. So there are lots of nice acronyms, but essentially AIS, Account Information, means that if I as a consumer give you, Tom, the right, you can now access all my banking data that's been sat in the background, and HSBC, NatWest, any of the banks have to send it to you. And with the PIS space, the payment initiation, it means that if I give you permission, you can also make a payment on my behalf. Now, the payment one is more about, you can do really slick customer experiences of, if I want to be able to do real-time payments, or particularly something like refunding to a customer, I can say you've sold something. As I said, I work for a retailer and it wasn't quite right. And the customer's on the phone and they say, well, it hasn't worked out for me. And we can go, say, right, sir or madam, we've done a refund to your account and it's there now. Those kind of experiences are quite, that they change the speed at which you can service your customers' needs. But more from the marketing perspective, the account information becomes very interesting, because suddenly you're in a world where you can sit on top of the information you know about your customers and add in a completely different data set. So for the sake of argument, you run a coffee shop and you know that your customer comes and they like buying a latte each day at approximately 11 o'clock. If you've got all the banking information as well, it gives you, okay, so this person, they might go on holiday to France, or they might go and they might buy a coffee from another coffee shop in the afternoon at 3 o'clock, or you can see that they're making transactions. And it's all about, in my world, the marketing opportunity around, you've got your retail data, which could be individual level of, that someone's buying bananas or they're buying oranges. But also we've got a different lens of, what is this customer's life like? What do they do? Do they have any cash squeeze at the end of the month? Because obviously all the bills come in and, we can see from their profile that they like booking their holiday in January or February. What could we do to help that customer to live their life in a different way or maximize their life? And that's where I become a bit more excited. It's like the data is purely an enabler, but if you can unite that banking data of everything that's the financial living, the financial lives of our customers with whatever world you're in my case at the moment, retail, it becomes fascinating what kind of marketing messages, what kind of propositions that you can service. And you can service them almost real time or at the most relevant point in a customer's life when you can see, oh, actually, they're preparing for their children to go back to school. There are a lot of the expenditure this month. How could we help our customers prepare for that?
So basic question here. How does that work from a GDPR perspective? So if you're a coffee shop, you're not going to get the insight into what else the customer's been spending. You as a retailer would have lots of data points because you see they buy coffee and nappies and whatever it is. So how does it work from a privacy perspective? Because some people might be thinking that actually that sounds like it could be quite complex.
No, because in open banking, when you have to explicitly give permission for this AIS, for this account information to the company. So say you as Tom, you are asked, are you happy to give this access to this financial information to whoever this company is? And within that giving permission, they have to tell you exactly what they're going to use that information for. So you could use it for personalization. So I would look at that financial data and try and think, how could I give you better marketing offers from what I'm seeing in there? But you'd have to ask for that permission when I'm asking you, Tom, to give me access to that open banking.
So Sainsbury's would say to me, can we use this information about your bank account to provide a better personalized, tailored service?
Personalized tailored service. It could be, if you're going to use it for something like share of wallet, in our case, are they spending with us, Tesco's, Waitrose, Aldi, who are they spending with? The data, you ask for both access to that data, which the customer has to grant you, and also you have to be very specific with the permissions that you're asking, what you're going to use that data for. Obviously, the customer has the right to be able to say no and to deregister at any point, and that data has to then be treated in a different way, as in deleted or whatever, as to be within the rules of GDPR. Another thing about AIS is that you have to ask for permissions to continue that permission every 90 days at the moment. That's part of the regulation there. So it's basically, you just be very explicit with the customer about asking for permission and access to these things. And there has to be something in it for the customer. And where you see this AIS used quite a lot is there are a lot of fintechs out there that are trying to help people manage their budgets. So if you've had 3 different accounts in different places and you might not be always on top of where bills are going out or just how much money you've got to spare. So this has been around for a while now, but it's been mainly used just within the banking space. Where I think this becomes a bit more shiny is when you start trying to think about understanding the customer more generally, actually with other sources of data. In my case, I keep saying I'm very interested in the retail aspect of how do you make sure that the customer can afford and get the best offers and has the best marketing messages at the most relevant times. That's what I think it becomes a step change for the kind of service you can offer a customer. And you're right, you have to get it right so that it's not freaky for the customer, that you're kind of too much or you present it in an intrusive way. But at the same time, if someone's saying, oh, by the way, we've got great holiday offers, and it happens to be at the time when you normally book your holidays, with someone like Sainsbury's, we've got Nectar partners that are in the travel space. Or, say even if you're walking down the street and it's the time of day where you normally like a coffee and a great coffee offer comes through, you're going to have to think very carefully about how you position it. But if you get it right, that data could really unlock a great customer experience, even better loyalty, and very powerful marketing channels.
So who is doing this well? You mentioned the fintech people and you talked about retailers. What other examples of brands providing better services using AIS can you think of, or what are the ones that have inspired you so far?
I mean, part of the exciting thing is there isn't anyone I've seen that I think is doing it really well yet. I think we're right at the beginning of this curve. If you look at AIS is more prevalent, it's being used much more out in the market than the PIS at the moment is, which is the payment bits. I think both of these areas, they're only just about coming online right now of being very stable, as in the banks had to open up their APIs to be able to let this data go in a very secure way, as you've said, and be used. So it's only now that actually the background tech is really enabling this to be done with a good customer experience. So I mean, I've seen it in a few different places, but as I said, it's normally the age-old thing of how do I manage my money better? Not particularly inspiring. as I said, I think where it could be fascinating, and I haven't seen anyone do this yet, is where you get two different data sets which you're using together, but really focused on a customer outcome that's new and different.
So can you give me an example of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you start getting into the world of I want to have real-time share of wallet. I can understand a customer's needs, and I want to go on holiday, and you can see that normally the kind of places they'd like to go would be somewhere in Europe. They normally shop for certain type of stuff beforehand. They get their insurance from this company. Suddenly you go, oh, actually, would you like this kind of dream getaway break at the weekend? You could pull in partners, be there someone like Secret Escapes or something like that. You could take all the hassle away. It could be a wardrobe of clothes, and you could see that they used to shop. Maybe they were shopping at Zara, maybe they were shopping somewhere else. You can tailor all of that information in one go to try and say, well, here are these great offers. Would you like, this outfit? You could go to the south of France. You could be in this mansion. Actually, we've taken care of there's this travel insurance. There's this way of getting to the airport. All of those kind of things, it starts opening up a kind of a better understanding and better offers for the customer.
So how does this work from a user experience perspective? Who is providing these offers? Because if I've linked my supermarket retailer account and I've linked my insurance account and I've given all these companies account info service, AIS access, who is pulling all these threads together?
I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head, and this is where, in my world, Nectar is a wonderful channel of. Recently, it's become digital, so it's predominantly around loyalty at the moment. But it's an interesting outlet. But essentially, what you need is an interface to the customer, which they're comfortable in engaging with you about multiple things, and you preferably use it quite frequently. So I mean. It could be even something like WhatsApp or something like that, where if they wanted to go into wider services beyond just communications, why not? It's something that customers go in there. They have to be comfortable that you have the right to speak to them about certain topics. Nectar is one of those things where people are comfortable that it's not just Sainsbury's in there. I mean, Sainsbury's Group is Sainsbury's, Argos, Habitat, so loads of retail missions, but it's loads of other people in there as well. It is coffee shops, it's travel partners. It's a place that you would go that you wouldn't necessarily, it would feel comfortable that you've got different types of offers and different types of merchants and providers talking to you.
So this feels a lot like a few of the conversations I've had in this podcast about people who have talked about customers or consumers getting direct value for their data and being paid for it almost. We've seen some extreme examples that I think have fallen foul, like People.io, whereas the idea is, you literally get paid for your data. You get Amazon vouchers, and there's been a handful of companies that have tried to do that. And then there's been Inrupt. I'm not sure where it's got to recently, but this is Tim Berners-Lee's idea that you have a kind of a cell with all of your data in it, and then you allow different people access to that data. So it's not just spending, it's also health and passport and insurance, all that kind of stuff. And then you would kind of let different businesses have different access, and then you actually create a model whereby people can buy that data from you. But what you're talking about, I think is fascinating, is actually a much more palatable, a believable version of that, where it's like, right, well, I'm going to hand out all of my data to all of these different companies that I trust to look after that data, and they can all pay me, not as in money, but they can pay me in ease of use or access or inspiration or better deals or quicker deals or tailored services and solutions. Have I understood that right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, as in that there has to be something in it for the customer, and it should be marketing at its best of you understand the customer better to provide them with more relevant and basically value. If there's nothing in it for the customer and you're not respecting the right timing and the right boundaries in there, I mean, it's never going to work. And it's all about just being clear of people, myself included. I forget when some of my insurance is up. I forget that kind of stuff, and it's stressful. Or you're so busy in the day, you don't necessarily have time to order everything you want. Or when you get home, you found that you don't have the right things you need for, cooking a meal that night or something like that. It's all about thinking about what is the right way where you can take stress out of people's lives in whatever form. It could be time stress, it can be money stress. And that's where I think of this whole thing about with the account information, you can see at certain points in the month and at certain times of year, people do face financial squeeze in their life. And you've got to think, well, how can we help people with that? And so it's got to be all around, are you delivering value through deepening the relationship? And the relationship doesn't have to be mega deep, but it does have to be, okay, it's the helping hand at the right time, rather than I'm just trying to thrust the message at someone when they're even not in the right mode to receive it, or it's just not relevant. If I'm talking about kind of holidays in France and the person never goes to France, or, they like doing something else with their time. It's about using that information to better serve the customer, not use against them or be freaky. But once you've got that in your head, it's all about what would add value most to your customer. And from what we can see and we know of them in one arena, but also we've got this other area where we can help understand them better. That I think is a good starting point.
So if a marketer is listening to this podcast and thinks, right, I want to get in on that game, what are the simple steps that they could take in a week in order to take advantage of open banking?
I think within there, as we've touched on, there's the you got to get the permissions right and know what you're doing. And part of the way you can do that, there are multiple providers out there that help you actually with all these API calls and the actual technical side. Most of those providers are actually can advise you, but you also need to be comfortable about making sure that obviously you're asking the right permissions. You've got to store the data in a very secure environment to make sure that you're compliant with GDPR, and that you don't have you don't leave yourself open to any data breaches. But I think before you even go down that line, you've got to think about, well, all you've got to do is think, what kind of information is there in my own current account or that's stored in there that might be useful and inform a better way of marketing to yourself with whatever kind of product that you've got. It might be a marker of timing of, like, on Fridays you go and Fridays is your eating out or takeaway night, or just anything that's, you've got to think, is there any value in that data? Because if there isn't for your specific business, then maybe you don't want to go down that route, so you do that first. But if there is, and what you'll get hold of, or what AIS would give you, is the equivalent of your own data. So if you start thinking about for yourself, is there anything in there that would help me better use, better market to kind of whatever base, the kind of products that you're thinking about?
Regrettably, we're at the end of the podcast. Thank you for a massive education in open banking. I sort of understood it before we started talking. I think I've got a much better hand on it now, but also of the creative possibilities for it. And if it works and people use it in the right way, I think that's going to be a win for the consumer as well as the providers, right? So that was brilliant. Thank you so much. Andrew, if people want to get in touch with you, how would you like them to do it?
The best way is via LinkedIn. And I'm always, as I said, always happy to hear about new ideas or a kind of different areas that people are looking at.
And what makes a brilliant LinkedIn message to you?
I'm not really sure how to answer that one. Just be direct and say hello.
I love it. Andrew, thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure, Tom.